What really makes a quarterback great? Is it the championships, the records, or something deeper, the heart and the resilience to keep fighting, even when the odds are stacked against you? Today, we dive into the story of Tony Romo, a name that echoes with both admiration and controversy. Romo wasn't your typical NFL star. He was never the #1 pick or even a pick at all. His journey started from the bottom, undrafted and overlooked, but he didn't let that stop him. Instead, he turned every obstacle into motivation, every setback into fuel. And yet, despite all the records he would go on to break with the Dallas Cowboys, Romo's career remains one of the most debated in NFL history. For some, he's the underdog who defied the odds. For others, he's the quarterback who couldn't deliver when it mattered most. So was Tony Romo really a choke artist? Or was he simply unlucky? To understand Tony Romo's journey, you have to imagine a place far from the stadium lights and roaring crowds. Burlington, Wisconsin, is a small town with only about 10,000 people, where neighbors know each other by name and life moves at its own quiet pace. In a place like this, football wasn't about fame or contracts. It was just a game that brought people together on chilly Friday nights. For Tony, growing up here was both a gift and a challenge. His parents, Ramiro and Joan, were hardworking, humble people who passed those values on to Tony and his two sisters. His dad, a construction worker, believed in showing, not telling, the meaning of hard work. From a young age, Tony absorbed this ethic, watching his father come home late, covered in the day's work. Ramiro wasn't the type to sugarcoat things. He encouraged Tony's dreams, but he also knew life could be harsh and unpredictable. And that's why one day, he'd have to have a conversation with Tony that would change everything. Like many kids in Burlington, Tony first fell in love with basketball. He spent endless hours dribbling on his driveway, picturing himself making the game-winning shot at the buzzer. But as he grew older, reality crept in. No matter how much he practiced, Tony wasn't built for the pro basketball court. He was shorter than the typical player, and no amount of effort could bridge that gap. Ramiro, who had always been his biggest supporter, eventually sat Tony down. "You know, Tony," he began, gently but firmly, "it's going to be hard to play basketball at the highest level. You're good, but maybe a few inches too short, maybe a bit too slow." For most kids, that would have been the end of the road. To hear your father, a man you admire, respect, and rely on for guidance, say that your dreams might not be possible, that's the kind of moment that could break someone. Tony could have let that conversation crush him, but instead, he found a different dream. If basketball wasn't his future, maybe football was. He'd always been an athlete, quick on his feet and resilient, and with a mind that absorbed every strategy, every play, like a sponge. Why not football? So he turned his attention to the high school football field, where he started as the backup quarterback. Being the backup, someone who watches from the sidelines, patiently waiting for a chance that may never come, was something Tony would come to know all too well. But he didn't let that define him. Through persistence, he fought his way to the starting position. On that small high school field, Tony started making a name for himself. He had this incredible ability to improvise on the fly, to see plays unfold before they happened. But even then, scouts weren't watching, and the opportunities felt so limited. When it came time for college, Tony wasn't flooded with offers. The big schools didn't come calling, so he accepted the one chance he had: a spot at Eastern Illinois University, a small Division I, a school that had produced almost no NFL talent. It didn't matter to Tony. He just wanted the chance to play, and he planned to make the most of it. At Eastern Illinois, he thrived, turning himself into a record-setting quarterback, shattering every mark the program had. In 3 years, he threw for nearly 8,000 yards and a staggering 82 touchdowns. But even as he broke records, he was still just the kid from a small school in Illinois. He didn't have the visibility or prestige of a big school player, and NFL scouts barely knew his name. Then came the 2003 NFL Draft, the moment that Tony and his family had been waiting for. The Romo household was packed with family and friends, each of them hopeful, believing that maybe this would be the day Tony's dreams would come true. Round after round passed, but still, his name was never called. In the 6th round, he watched the faces around him go from excitement to unease, to disappointment. By the time the final pick was announced, Tony was officially undrafted. The weight of that moment was crushing. Imagine the silence in the room as the realization set in. After all his hard work, Tony was left empty-handed. In that silence, Tony felt something beyond disappointment. He felt humiliation, a doubt creeping in that maybe the world was right about him, that maybe he wasn't good enough. And yet, he didn't let it destroy him. That night, something inside him shifted. He didn't give up. He got on the phone. One by one, he called every NFL team he could, trying to convince them to give him a shot. Most didn't answer, but eventually, he got through to the Dallas Cowboys. They weren't calling him because they saw the next franchise quarterback. They were calling because they needed an extra arm for the preseason. They offered him the smallest contract, with no promises, and certainly no guarantees. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Tony. He took it, deciding to head to Dallas to prove everyone wrong. For 3 long years, Romo rode the bench. He was the third-string quarterback, barely visible in the Cowboys lineup, always waiting, always watching. He became known for his dedication to practice, spending endless hours throwing footballs into a couch in his apartment, refining his technique until it became second nature. He didn't just wait. He prepared, quietly but relentlessly, for the chance that might never come. Every day was a battle against frustration, against the feeling that he might spend his entire career in the shadows. But he held on, day after day, rep after rep, telling himself that when his moment came, he would be ready. And all he needed was one chance to show everyone, his family, his father, and the NFL, that they were wrong about him. In the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys aren't just another team, they're America's team. Playing for the Cowboys comes with a weight and a scrutiny that most players can only imagine. But for Tony Romo, the journey to becoming the face of the Cowboys was anything but straightforward. It was 2006, and Romo had spent 3 long years as a backup, hidden on the bench, watching and waiting. The Cowboys had cycled through multiple quarterbacks, searching for stability. Then, in the middle of the season, during a Monday Night Football game, the moment Romo had been preparing for finally arrived. Drew Bledsoe, the veteran starter, threw a costly interception, and Cowboys head coach Bill Parcells had seen enough. In that instant, Parcells made the call that would change Romo's life forever. Tony Romo was going in. Imagine standing on the sideline, helmet in hand, knowing that everything you've worked for, every late night, every practice throw, every missed opportunity, had led you to this exact moment. Romo's heart raced, but he didn't let the nerve show. He stepped onto the field, surrounded by the deafening roar of fans who didn't yet know his name. His first pass intercepted. For most players, that would have been a breaking point. But Romo didn't flinch. He shook it off, came back, and started playing with a kind of reckless creativity that was rare in the league. Romo's style was something entirely different. He had this almost magical ability to escape pressure, to extend plays, and to throw on the run with pinpoint accuracy. Fans saw glimpses of his idol, Brett Favre, in the way Romo played, fearless, unpredictable, and willing to take risks that others wouldn't. Over the next several games, Romo's confidence only grew, and so did his legend. He didn't just win games, he made them exciting. He'd scramble, dodge defenders, and launch the ball downfield in ways that left fans in awe and defenders scrambling. Romo wasn't just playing football, he was performing. That season, Romo led the Cowboys to the playoffs, a rare feat for an undrafted quarterback. But in the first round, against the Seattle Seahawks, came the play that would haunt him for years. With just over a minute left in the game, Romo set up for what should have been an easy game-winning field goal attempt. All he had to do was hold the snap. But as he crouched down, the ball slipped through his fingers. Romo picked it up and tried to run it in himself, lunging for the end zone, but he was tackled just short. The Cowboys lost, and that single botched snap would become a defining moment in Romo's career. For many fans, that was the night Tony Romo went from being an underdog hero to a choker. But Romo didn't quit. The following season, he proved himself again, setting Cowboys records for touchdowns and passing yards, leading them to a 13-3 record, the best in the NFC. The buzz around Romo grew, but so did the pressure. Playing for the Cowboys meant every win was celebrated and every loss was amplified. And the spotlight grew even brighter when his personal life became front-page news. Romo started dating pop star Jessica Simpson, a relationship that sent the media into a frenzy. The public, always eager to find an excuse, started blaming her for his struggles, calling her a curse. Suddenly, every misstep Romo took wasn't just a mistake. It was a headline. The 2007 playoffs were supposed to be the Cowboys' moment. They had the talent, they had the momentum, and most importantly, they had Romo. But once again, the pressure proved crushing. The Cowboys lost to the New York Giants in a heartbreaker, a game in which Romo couldn't quite deliver the magic everyone expected. As he walked off the field, the cameras captured his frustration, his disappointment, and once again, the label of choker reappeared, haunting him in the press and with fans. Romo's career was filled with these near misses, these heartbreaks that would come to define him. In 2008, he led the Cowboys to another strong season, only to lose a critical game to the Philadelphia Eagles in brutal fashion, missing the playoffs by a single game. Romo had thrown for over 300 yards and fought until the final whistle, but it wasn't enough. Fans grew frustrated, tired of seeing their team come so close, only to fall short time and time again. And as the face of the franchise, Romo took the brunt of the blame. In their eyes, he was the quarterback who couldn't deliver in December, who couldn't win the big games. And yet, he kept coming back season after season, fighting through injuries, taking hits, and refusing to give up. Romo's style of play was both a blessing and a curse. He was willing to risk everything on a single play, and while it led to incredible highlights, it also led to painful mistakes. But that's what made him so captivating. Fans never knew which Romo they were going to get: the magician who could pull off the impossible, or the quarterback who would make a crushing mistake. Every game was an emotional roller coaster, a drama that played out week after week on the field. And through it all, Romo kept his head down, never blaming his teammates, never pointing fingers. He absorbed the criticism, the doubts, the endless pressure, and kept fighting. But the reality was, Romo was often playing against the odds. The Cowboys' defense was unreliable, and he was often forced to carry the team on his shoulders. In one game after another, he'd put up incredible numbers, only to watch the defense give up last-minute points. The media, however, rarely saw these factors. They focused on Romo's mistakes, his failed comebacks, his lack of championships. But behind each of those games was a player giving everything he had, often in pain, often with injuries that would sideline most players. By 2014, Romo was still fighting, still leading, and he had one of his best seasons yet. He led the NFL in passer rating, silencing many critics, and took the Cowboys to the playoffs once again. In a thrilling comeback win over the Detroit Lions, Romo showed that he still had the magic, that he could deliver when it mattered. But in the next round, against the Green Bay Packers, controversy struck again. A crucial catch by Dez Bryant was ruled incomplete, ending the Cowboys' season, and for many fans, what might have been Romo's best shot at a Super Bowl. By the end of his career, Romo's legacy was deeply complicated. He was the undrafted kid who had defied every odd to become the Cowboys' all-time leading passer. But he was also the quarterback whose career would be remembered for near misses and heartbreaks, for moments that could have been, and for the games where he just couldn't quite reach the finish line. In the end, Tony Romo's story isn't one of pure victory or defeat. It's the story of resilience, of never giving up, of taking every blow and still coming back for more. And maybe, just maybe, that's what true greatness is. Tony Romo always believed talent was just the starting point. He knew hard work would determine the rest, but even he couldn't have predicted the tough road that lay ahead. Coming out of high school, Romo didn't catch the eye of any major colleges. The big programs, the ones where future NFL stars are bred, didn't come calling. Instead, he was offered a spot at Eastern Illinois University, a small school in Illinois with no record of sending players to the NFL. Still, Romo knew what he had to do, prove he belonged, even if nobody was watching. At Eastern Illinois, Romo went above and beyond. He smashed records, throwing for close to 8,000 yards and 82 touchdowns in 3 seasons. By the end of his college career, He was a legend at Eastern Illinois, but to NFL scouts, he was still just the kid from a small school. As the 2003 NFL draft approached, Romo and his family gathered, filled with hope. But as the rounds ticked by, that hope started to fade. Round after round passed, until every pick was taken and his name was never called. Imagine the silence in that room as it sank in he was going to be undrafted. Tony's heart sank as well. He had given everything he had, only to be overlooked yet again. But instead of letting that disappointment end his dreams, Romo felt a new fire ignite. He wasn't ready to walk away, so he picked up the phone. Romo called every team that might take a chance on him, trying to sell himself. After many attempts, he finally found a glimmer of hope in the Dallas Cowboys. They didn't see him as the next great quarterback. They just needed an extra arm to throw in practice. But for Tony, it was an opening, and that was all he needed. He joined the Cowboys as a third-string quarterback, just barely hanging on to a spot on the roster. For 3 long years, he rode the bench. As third string, Romo was almost invisible to fans, coaches, and the media. But he didn't waste those years. In the quiet of practice, Romo refined his game, watching and learning from veteran quarterback Drew Bledsoe and soaking up every word of advice from legendary coach Bill Parcells. At night, he would go back to his apartment and throw pass after pass into the couch cushions, training for a moment that might never come. Finally, in the fall of 2006, the moment Romo had been waiting for arrived. In a Monday night football game, the Cowboys' offense was struggling under Bledsoe, and Coach Parcells decided it was time for a change. Romo got the call to take the field, and suddenly, the unknown backup was thrust into the national spotlight. His first pass, it was intercepted. For most players, this would have been a nightmare, but Romo didn't let it shake him. He returned to the field with an air of confidence that would become his trademark, ready to make things right, and he did. Romo played with a reckless creativity that left fans and commentators in awe. He had a unique ability to extend plays, evading defenders with a seemingly sixth sense, and making throws from impossible angles. He wasn't afraid to take risks, and it showed. With Romo at the helm, the Cowboys started winning. He led them to the playoffs that very season, transforming from a bench warmer to the new star quarterback in a matter of weeks. For fans, Romo's rise was nothing short of magical. They hadn't seen this kind of excitement at quarterback in years. He wasn't just winning games, he was electrifying. Cowboys games became must-watch TV, with fans tuning in to see what their new quarterback would do next. In Romo, they saw a little bit of Brett Favre, his childhood idol, a player willing to take the big shots, to gamble it all in the pursuit of greatness. This was the rise of Tony Romo, a storybook season that took an undrafted, unknown player and made him the face of America's team. From here, the possibilities felt endless. The Tony Romo era in Dallas was like a thrilling, high-stakes roller coaster filled with unforgettable highs, heartbreaking lows, and moments that left everyone wondering, was he the hero the Cowboys needed? Or was he their tragic Achilles heel? When Romo took over as the Cowboys' starting quarterback in 2006, fans saw him as a fresh start, a spark that the team had been missing. But with every big moment came a mounting pressure. And as the years went on, Romo's career became a chaotic mix of brilliance and disaster. Romo's first season as a starter ended in the playoffs, where he nearly led the Cowboys to victory over the Seattle Seahawks. With seconds left, Dallas was in position for a game-winning field goal. Romo, still handling holder duties, crouched to set the ball, but it slipped through his fingers. In a split second, he picked up the ball and sprinted for the end zone, lunging desperately as defenders closed in, but he came up just inches short. The Cowboys lost by a single point. For Romo, that botched snap was more than a missed play. It became a symbol, a cruel label of choker that he would carry with him for years to come. Yet Romo didn't let it break him. He returned in 2007 stronger than ever, and the Cowboys took the league by storm, ending the regular season with 13 wins, one of the best records in team history. Romo was throwing touchdown after touchdown, breaking Cowboys' passing records and proving he was more than just a fluke. But while the team's success grew, so did the spotlight. That year, Romo started dating pop star Jessica Simpson, and the media frenzy around them became overwhelming. Some fans even blamed her for distracting him, branding her a curse after he struggled in the team's divisional playoff game. The Cowboys lost to the Giants, and just like that, another season with so much promise ended in disappointment. The blame inevitably fell on Romo's shoulders, feeding the narrative that he couldn't win when it mattered most. Then came the injuries. Over the years, Romo's fearlessness on the field started to catch up with him. In 2010, he suffered a broken clavicle, sidelining him for the remainder of the season. He returned in 2011 with a renewed determination, but the injuries kept piling up. That year, he played through broken ribs and a punctured lung, leading a dramatic comeback against the San Francisco 49ers. It was a gutsy performance that showed Romo's toughness, but it was also a reminder of the physical toll he was paying. Each injury slowed him down, and the window to lead the Cowboys to a championship began to feel like it was closing. Through it all, Romo continued to put up impressive numbers, breaking records and winning games. But even as he played some of the best football of his career, the criticism only grew louder. Dallas fans were desperate for a return to Super Bowl glory, and they placed those dreams squarely on Romo's shoulders. He was the face of the franchise, expected to lead them back to the top. But year after year, it seemed like the story ended the same way, with a playoff heartbreak, a missed opportunity, or a season crushed by an injury. In 2014, Romo put together what many consider his best season. He led the league in passer rating and brought the Cowboys back to the playoffs. In the first round, he orchestrated a thrilling comeback win over the Detroit Lions, showing everyone that he could win under pressure. But in the next game, against the Green Bay Packers, controversy struck again. A catch by Dez Bryant that would have put the Cowboys within winning distance was overturned, and Dallas was eliminated. Once again, Romo's season ended in disappointment, a painful reminder of how elusive true success had been for him and the Cowboys. As the seasons passed, Romo's chaotic journey in Dallas became almost mythic. To his fans, he was the underdog hero, a player who fought through every setback with grit and heart. But to his critics, he was the quarterback who couldn't deliver, the one who made costly mistakes in the biggest moments. His style, both thrilling and risky, made him a polarizing figure. He could throw a perfect pass one moment, then make a risky decision the next, and in each game, it felt like anything could happen. That unpredictability made him exciting to watch, but it also made his mistakes stand out even more. By 2016, Romo's body had taken all it could. In the preseason, he suffered yet another serious back injury. This time, the Cowboys had a promising rookie waiting in the wings, Dak Prescott. As Romo watched from the sidelines, Prescott led the Cowboys to an impressive 13 wins, marking a changing of the guard in Dallas. When Romo finally returned, he chose to step aside, passing the torch to Prescott in an emotional press conference that felt like a goodbye. The era of Tony Romo as the Cowboys quarterback was over. In the end, the Tony Romo era wasn't about one glorious Super Bowl run or a perfect record. It was about the thrill and heartbreak of a player who gave everything he had every time he stepped onto the field. For Romo, there was no other way. He left it all out there, and whether fans loved him or criticized him, they couldn't deny the passion, the fight, and the unforgettable moments he brought to America's team. From the moment Tony Romo took over as the Cowboys' starting quarterback, he carried the weight of expectations that came with playing for one of the most storied franchises in sports. In Dallas, success isn't just hoped for, it's demanded. The Cowboys' history, rich with Super Bowl titles and legendary players, cast a long shadow over every quarterback who followed. For Romo, it was even heavier. He wasn't just another starter. He was supposed to be the quarterback who would finally lead Dallas back to the promised land. But Romo's time with the Cowboys was never easy. Year after year, he fought not only his opponents on the field, but also the harsh realities of being part of a team that was, in many ways, flawed. Unlike quarterbacks who had the luxury of a solid defense or an all-around well-constructed team, Romo often found himself alone in the spotlight, forced to carry an overwhelming load on his shoulders. The Cowboys' defense, throughout much of Romo's career, was inconsistent at best and a liability at worst. It seemed like no matter how many points Romo put on the board, his defense was always just one step away from letting the game slip through their fingers. And yet, Romo took the responsibility willingly. He understood what being the Cowboys' quarterback meant. He knew the expectations, the pressure, and he embraced it. Every season, he threw himself into the role with everything he had, trying to make up for the team's weaknesses with his own strengths. But in those crucial moments, when he needed the team around him to step up, he often found himself stranded. In several key games, Romo led the Cowboys downfield, setting up potential game-winning drives, only to watch the defense give up a last-second touchdown or the special teams miss a critical field goal. Each of those moments chipped away at the team's progress and added to Romo's growing reputation as a quarterback who couldn't deliver in the clutch, even when the real story was far more complicated. But the weight of those expectations became more than just external pressure. It seeped into Romo's own self-view. The criticism, the constant media scrutiny, and the fan reactions after every close loss created a narrative that even Romo himself struggled to shake. He began to bear the label of a choker, a quarterback who could rack up impressive stats, but couldn't win when it mattered. And yet, when looking back at the full scope of his career, it's clear that Romo had more than his fair share of bad luck. Despite being one of the most consistent and efficient quarterbacks of his era, the moments that defined him in the public eye were often the ones where circumstances spun out of his control. Romo's journey was also marked by a series of crushing injuries. Every time he got close to silencing his critics, his body seemed to betray him. Each hit, each broken bone, each fracture was a reminder that time was running out, and every setback weighed heavily on his mind. By 2013, Romo's injuries were taking a visible toll, but he pressed on, leading the Cowboys as best as he could. In 2014, he had what was arguably his best season yet. He led the league in passer rating, threw 34 touchdowns, and took Dallas back to the playoffs. Fans watched in anticipation as he orchestrated a thrilling playoff victory over the Detroit Lions, proving he could indeed win in those pressure-filled moments. But the next week, against Green Bay, a controversial call on a Dez Bryant catch took the game, and Romo shot at a deeper playoff run out of his hands. It was a gut-wrenching loss, one that summed up the unlucky breaks that seemed to haunt Romo's career. The emotional toll of these constant setbacks was something few could fully understand. Romo had endured years of high expectations, physical pain, and unending criticism. He fought through all of it, but in the end, he couldn't conquer the one opponent he couldn't avoid: time. As the Cowboys looked to the future with Dak Prescott, Romo knew his time was coming to an end. He faced the reality that he might never have the chance to rewrite his legacy, never have that one magical season that would silence all the doubts. And so, with grace and humility, he stepped aside, choosing to support his team from the sidelines and passing the torch to Prescott. In the end, Romo's career was a testament to resilience, to giving everything he had in the face of overwhelming challenges and endless expectations. He may not have reached the Super Bowl, but he left behind a legacy of grit, passion, and a loyalty to the Cowboys that will forever be a part of his story. In April of 2017, Tony Romo announced his retirement from the NFL after years of grinding through injuries, fighting battles on the field and in the public eye. He decided to hang up his cleats. It was a quiet end to a career that had been anything but quiet, and while it didn't end with a Super Bowl parade, his legacy was etched deeply in the hearts of Cowboys fans and in the minds of all who followed his journey. For Romo, stepping away from the game meant more than leaving behind the touchdowns, the records, or the packed stadiums. He was saying goodbye to something that had defined him, to a career that he had fought so hard to build from nothing. Football had given Romo everything, and he had given everything back. To the end, he remained the undrafted underdog, the small-town kid from Wisconsin who had dreamed big and achieved more than anyone thought possible. When Romo transitioned into the broadcast booth with CBS, he found a new kind of success, one that few had expected but many quickly came to appreciate. His enthusiasm for the game, his sharp insights, and his uncanny ability to predict plays made him a fan favorite all over again. In a way, it was as if Romo had found his true calling, a place where he could share his love for the game and connect with fans without taking another brutal hit. But even as he thrived in his new role, he remained forever linked to his years with the Cowboys, where every pass, every heartbreak, and every triumphant comeback contributed to his mythic story. And so, what does Tony Romo's legacy truly look like? Some might point to his records: the over 34,000 passing yards, the 248 touchdowns, the numerous fourth-quarter comebacks. But Romo's impact goes beyond numbers and records. His career was about the fight, about playing with heart and determination, even when it seemed like the world was against him. Romo didn't have the championships that other quarterbacks used to define greatness, but he had something else. He had grit, resilience, and an unwavering love for the game. To Cowboys fans, Romo's legacy is one of loyalty and inspiration. He was a player who never gave up on his team, even when it seemed like his team was giving up on him. He took hit after hit, injury after injury, and he kept coming back, determined to lead, to inspire, to give them a reason to believe. There was a time when Romo's mistakes would echo louder than his achievements. That botched snap, the interceptions, the close losses, they became his public identity. But with time, fans saw the real Tony Romo, the quarterback who carried the Cowboys when few others could, the player who was often left alone to shoulder the hopes of America's team. The man who fought with every ounce of his being to win, even if victory was sometimes out of reach. For those who watched him play, Tony Romo's story isn't one of failure or missed opportunities. It's the story of a player who gave all he had for his team, who fought through pain and pressure without ever losing the joy of the game. There's a beauty in that kind of story, in a player who remains devoted to his team and his fans even when he knows the world is quick to judge, quick to label. In the end, Romo's legacy isn't about whether he was the best quarterback in Cowboys history, or whether he deserved more credit or fewer critics. It's about how he played the game with heart, with humility, and with a relentless drive to prove that he belonged. Today, Romo stands as a reminder of what it means to fight for your dreams, to live with passion, and to face every obstacle with courage. For every young player who goes undrafted, for every fan who believes in second chances, Tony Romo's story will always be a beacon of hope. He may not have lifted the Lombardi Trophy, but in the hearts of fans, he's a champion, a player who left everything on the field, who gave Cowboys fans a reason to cheer, to dream, and to believe. And that, more than any stat or trophy, is the legacy that will endure.